What's up guys, Sean here, and today we're going to talk about Battening's response to my response. For those of you who haven't been following along with all this nonsense, Battening made an overlong video that was like a takedown piece of no bullshit. It had some good points, which I lightly touched on in my last video, but it had some mistakes, which is what I delved into. There were just things in it that were inaccurate, and I pointed them out. So I uploaded the video, Battening made a response, and now people expect me to make a response, so that's this video. Essentially, Battening's response was basically him doubling down on all of his points and addressing none of my points. So, like, this video is not going to be that interesting because I'm just going to reiterate my points, but use his new video to prove him wrong. For those of you who are completely disinterested in this stuff, I will go back to making normal videos after this. So Battening's video starts out with him saying that I mentioned the fact that 7 people were involved as contributors to his video way too many fucking times.
Now this video starts off on the worst point that he could have gone after, and it's not just the start of this video, it's actually throughout the entire video, over and over and over again. And the fact that this is like the big point that you wanted to stress in your video is fucking bizarre because it's not a good point at all, and I can't believe that you wouldn't see that.
I know I said it way too many fucking times. Hence me holding up a fucking Thor hammer every time I made that point. It wasn't my main point, it wasn't my most powerful point. It was, in fact, my weakest point. The fact that almost everybody who came over from Battening's video mentioned this point seemed really ridiculous because I actually pinned a comment explaining that these guys said that they had very little involvement, if any involvement, in Battening's video as the pinned comment, like, an hour after the video uploaded. So, like, this point wasn't really crucial to my video. I was just repeating it at the beginning and at the end of other points that actually did matter. If all the people that I referenced were intimately involved in the making of this video and it was accurate, it wouldn't matter. It was just a joke because it had 7 people listed as contributors and there were some pretty bad inaccuracies. I did appreciate the mashup though. I always wanted somebody to make a mashup of me, and that was partially the motivation, and I appreciate you. So the next set of points that Battening really failed to address from my video about his video were the points about Spider-Man Homecoming. Essentially, Battening made a segment where he said No BS was complaining about the diversity in Spider-Man Homecoming. Now, I pointed out and proved with my video that Battening had taken No BS out of context, because in reality, No BS had actually praised the diversity in Spider-Man Homecoming and pointed out how it worked for the story.
From the title, you may be thinking I'm about to bash the new Spider-Man movie for being too SJW and politically correct. Well, this is going to be quite the opposite, actually. I'm here to praise the Spider-Man Homecoming movie for not only being a great flick and fun to watch, but it also did something most movies fail at miserably. Marvel's new Spider-Man may have actually incorporated social justice elements in a good and productive way.
I added the fact that the main twist in the movie is actually helped by the diversity of the casting, but for some reason Battening decided to ignore all of that and say that I had taken him out of context in this clip here.
Okay, so for somebody who claims that I'm taking no bullshit out of context, you seem to have accidentally missed a very important clip from my video.
If the only thing you have to complain about here is the race of the main character in a movie, we've truly devolved the debate into trivial nonsense. My only nitpick here would be Peter Parker's love interest, almost all black chick here. If the only thing you have to complain about here is the race of the main character in a movie, we've truly devolved the debate into trivial nonsense.
Oh shit, it seems like that was one of the reasons why I was criticizing him, because he's a complete fucking hypocrite.
But not having that clip didn't change the nature of what Battening was saying. He was claiming No BS was complaining about the diversity. He wasn't, he in fact praised it. And he said that he was upset about this character's casting. I proved that he wasn't.
My only nitpick here would be Peter Parker's love interest. He starts off crushing on Liz, the hot, almost all black chick here, who's fucking 27 years old in real life. Can you guys believe that? Anyway, that love story doesn't really pan out by the end of the movie, and it appears Zendaya's character is set up to be his next love interest in the next movie or something like that. I mean, the girl says her nickname is MJ at the end. That's gotta mean something if you follow Spider-Man stories at all.
As I said in my original video, he's complaining about the actions of this member of the cast, not her racial makeup. Zendaya, Michelle, Discount MJ, whatever you want to call her, was the most SJW member of the cast. When they were going to DC, She was like, I need to get my protest in. After they won the math league, she refused to go in the Washington Monument because it was built by slaves. She was the most SJW character in the movie. And that's what he was really complaining about. Although in his video, he did acknowledge that this was a nitpick because she was like the only character that was like the social justice character.
Next, we're going to talk about the Washington Monument. There's a particular sequence in the film that takes place there which is hard to ignore. The kids are visiting the monument on a field trip, and one teacher asks Zendaya's character if she wants to go up in the tower with them. She says something along the lines of, I'm not going to honor a monument that was built by slaves. To which the teacher turns to a guard and says, that's not true, is it? And then the guard basically gives him an iffy, maybe kind of hand move, which turns into a good laugh for the movie. Even I thought it was pretty funny, and I used to be a slave owner. And since this is the only big SJW kind of joke I can remember in the movie, I could easily say this film didn't overdo it with the politically correct shit at all.
Every other member of the cast was woven into the story seamlessly, and he didn't have a problem with it. He actually praised it. Alright, so the next point that Battening addressed has to do with Game of Thrones. I believe it was episode 1 or episode 2 of Game of Thrones, where there's all these women around the table. I pointed out in my video that No BS was reacting to the showrunners rather than the actual scene itself and what they had to say about the scene. Battening said basically that there was no feminism in the scene because they didn't say feminism, nor did they imply it.
Exact same information and situation being put forward by a bunch of old grizzled guys with gray beards. It would have been a lot less interesting to have it be Amelia at one end of the table and Diana at the other end of the table. To me, that just is such a breath of fresh air.
You're guilty of doing the exact same thing that I accused No Bullshit of doing. Finding shit where it isn't.
In reality, his point completely boils down to they didn't say the word feminism, therefore no feminism. Because it's definitely implied when they talk about how the scene would be completely different if it was men with beards, but since it's women, therefore it's a completely different, more compelling scene because you don't see that on television. These are talking points that we hear all the time from feminists. He shows a clip of the two showrunners from South by Southwest where they seem to be talking about the women in Game of Thrones.
In fact, this clip from South by Southwest earlier this year shows the same showrunners describing why there are more prominent female roles.
And this comes from, even from when we read the books initially, like we realized, you know, it's an awful world that the story takes place in, but there were more, in George's books, were more compelling female characters who had agency, who were out there, you know, they weren't secondary to anybody, they weren't anybody's like right-hand woman or wife.
Of course, in the clip, the showrunners mention agency, which is another SJW buzzword. According to feminists, you can either be an agent or an object, and all too often women are objects rather than agents, so agency is a feminist buzzword. It's been a feminist buzzword for a long fucking time. You know that whole Anita Sarkeesian in Patriarchy, women aren't the opposing team, they're actually the ball.
I've heard it said that in the game of Patriarchy, women are not the opposing team, they are the ball.
I just said that, Anita, but the whole them not being the opposing team but actually being the ball has to do with them being objects rather than agents. Agency is a big SJW buzzword, especially when it comes to representation in media. So to say nowhere did they imply feminist overtones when they're using feminist buzzwords makes no sense. So the point that I was making is that Brooks didn't just look at the episode of Game of Thrones and draw all these wild conclusions. He watched the After Thrones special and noticed the buzzwords in the After Thrones special. Your video actually supports my point rather than undermining it. Thank you for the additional clip. I didn't find that on my own. Next up is the tweets and the Holocaust stuff. I touched on this pretty lightly. Basically, what Battening did was he paired a series of bad tweets, which I acknowledged in my original video were bad tweets, with a Hitler didn't do joke, and he basically implied that there was something there when there really wasn't.
Okay, so the next part of Inspector's video, he goes over the Holocaust stuff that I went over. Now, I'm not going to show the exact same clip all over again, but if you didn't watch my video, I showed 2 instances where Brooks has said some kind of wonky shit about the Holocaust. The first being a Twitter conversation where Brooks either makes fun of somebody and trolls somebody who claims to have lost family in the Holocaust, or legitimately compares people dying in concentration camps to people who died in the war. The second clip was a Hitler didn't do nothing thing from a live stream that he was on. Now, as I said in the Worski live stream, I don't think anybody believes that Brooks thinks Hitler didn't do anything wrong, but when you look at his past about saying wonky shit about the Jews and the Holocaust, it really doesn't help your case to make a Hitler didn't do nothing joke.
He was connecting dots to make No BS seem like a worse person than he actually was. Battening focuses specifically on the tweets themselves in his response to me. I didn't defend the tweets because I have a crazy thing where I don't defend things that I disagree with. But basically what happens here is that Brooks tweeted some dumb shit at somebody who claims to be the granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor. It was pretty dumb, the tweets were cringy. He compared dying in the war to dying in the Holocaust. Obviously the Jews in the Holocaust were not enemy soldiers that did not put on a uniform. They were civilians ripped out of their home. It was very horrific. I didn't defend anything about these tweets whatsoever. I just said that you can't connect that one dot to a Dindu joke and say that there's something there that there isn't. In fact, of all the points in Battening's video, the one thing that I did contact Brooks and ask him about, because it requires more of an explanation, were these tweets. And essentially his explanation was that he wouldn't let a black person leverage their ancestors' slavery to win an argument. So he was really attacking somebody who was leveraging their grandfather's experience to win an argument. I understand the logic behind that. I understand the logic behind calling somebody out who is leveraging ancestral experience to win an argument. But again, in my opinion, it all falls apart when you start comparing the victims of the Holocaust to people who picked up guns and actually fought in a war and died. Two completely different things, they just happen to happen at the same time. But again, that doesn't mean that you can connect stupid things that he said on Twitter with a Dindu joke and imply that he was serious about the Dindu joke. You have to actually show more supporting evidence for that. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the final point, and this has to do with the sponsored content on the Las Vegas shooting video. So I said clearly in my last video that the only reason I was responding to the whole no BS Battening thing was because Battening went on the Worski stream, and he essentially cried for a solid minute because Brooks did a sponsored content video in a video where he was talking about how the left was exploiting the Las Vegas tragedy for political gain. In my video, I compared this to CNN running ads for about a third of their programming, and I knew at the time that this wasn't the best comparison, but I wanted Battening to say something like this.
We're not talking about Fox News and CNN. If NBC News would have came on during the shooting and they were like, well, there's 50 injured currently and the toll seems to be rising, and in this day of age, you really can't be too secure about anything, including the ingredients in your food, and that's why you should go to Subway, because all of their ingredients are extra fresh. That would be equivalent to what Brooks did. But again, we're not talking about Fox News, we're not talking about CNN, we're talking about Brooks and why he is a hypocrite, and this was a good example of that.
And the reason I slightly deceived him into saying something like that is because every radio show host in the country does ad reads. So when they read the news about a tragedy, oftentimes to go into a commercial break, they do an ad read. Now, other than Battening taking the bait on that point, I did expect him to actually respond to my points surrounding this issue. Unfortunately, he just doubled down and said, well, he's exploiting it in another way.
Okay, just because you're not exploiting a tragedy in the same way that somebody else is exploiting a tragedy, does not mean that you're not exploiting it. If somebody is exploiting that tragedy for political gain, and then you exploit that tragedy by using that tragedy as a selling point for a VPN service, yes, you're exploiting that tragedy. You don't have to exploit something in the same way as somebody else is exploiting it in order to be exploiting it. So yes, this does make him a hypocrite. In fact, this is a very, very good example of him being a hypocrite.
Even though in my video I clearly laid out that profit is not exploitation, and I explained how people like Battening end up disincentivizing content creators from covering important things. This is one of the reasons why YouTube videos about important stuff get demonetized, while YouTube videos about the latest Marvel movie trailer get promoted and premium ads. The fact is, professional YouTubers get paid to make videos. You, as the audience, choose whether or not you're going to watch those videos. You choose whether or not you're going to support them or their sponsors, which in effect supports them. In politics, we're discussing laws, and laws are inherently forceful. So somebody using a tragic event to push forward their pre-existing political agenda is different from somebody getting paid to do their job, which is make videos. And people need to get over the idea that there's something immoral about making money. Alright, so that's all I really have for you guys today. What I will say, though, is that if you're gonna accuse me of taking you out of context, maybe actually show an example of me doing so. Because nowhere in my video did I change the nature of anything that Battening was saying, and that assertion on his part without any evidence to back it up is just weak and false. If you like this video, then please show me by leaving a like. You can subscribe for more content, support me on PayPal and Patreon. This hopefully has been my final video on this topic. Till next time.